Hello and welcome to Political Forum for Wednesday, February 8th, 2017. Today we welcome the 29th Ward Alderman Chris Taliaferro. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
and appearing on Political Forum. My name is Freddie Calixto. I'm a board member here at CAN TV. And you are watching a live interactive program brought to you as a community service by CAN TV. Be sure to tell your friends so that they can also watch the show online on cantv.org/hotline. We welcome your questions and comments for the Alderman. Please call us at 312-738-1060 for any questions you have for the Alderman. Alderman, I want to put the map, and maybe we could just start off with you describing your ward, the 29th Ward, what it looks like today.
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me here, and I want to say it's a pleasure to be with you this evening to talk about issues throughout the city of Chicago, and in particular the 29th Ward. We serve the west side and northwest side of the city. Our boundaries are to the south, Roosevelt, and our far east boundary is Cicero, with our west boundary being Oriole, which is approximately 5 blocks west of Harlem, and Roscoe, which is 2 blocks north of Belmont. We border Cicero to the south, Oak Park to the west, and Elmwood Park to the far west. So it's a very expansive ward, and it covers a lot of territory.
It sure does. The map is, like you mentioned, the stair.
I call it the stair step.
Stair step. And of course, the contact information was there. We'll put that back up again so you can make sure you got the phone number, the website, and there's an email also there. So what else is going on in the 29th Ward? Tell us a little bit what's new.
There's always new things happening in the 29th Ward, but I'd say probably the things that are probably the most pressing. We're fighting very hard to help secure safety in our airports. That's a measure that I put forward in April of last year, and we're finally getting some traction with it. But I think of utmost importance on the west side of Chicago as well as throughout the city is we're addressing crime, and we're coming together as a community to make sure that we're putting our best efforts forward to reduce crime in the city of Chicago.
Okay. So what are your, I see you mentioned crime, so the surging violence, the struggle with police misconduct have dominated the headlines in Chicago and actually nation. What are your constituents telling you, and what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think in particular my constituents are very adamant about not sitting back and watching things happen. They're looking for their elected officials as well as the civic and social organizations within the ward to take a stand and to make plans on how we're going to reduce violence. But I think most important is we need to pull together. And that has been the cry, and not only the cry, but that's been the action as of lately. We're standing together to reduce violence on the west side of Chicago. If you are familiar with the statistics, as many folks are, the Austin community, which is a part of which I represent, ended the year as the highest, we're having the highest number of murders as compared to other wards in the city of Chicago. It ended with 92, and we're off to a fast-paced start already. With over 4,000 shootings last year, we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to reduce those efforts.
Thank you. I think we have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Hi, Alderman. Thanks for taking my call. I hate to switch the subject, considering you're talking about something so important as the violence in the city. But I did want to ask about last year. You were really pushing heavily for testing the water for lead in the schools. And I know that I had read an article that you wanted to get that done by the end of the year. Can you talk about how much progress has been made on getting water in schools tested for lead?
Well, I think the city as well as Chicago Public Schools have tested the majority of the sites. They've even included the Chicago Park District and other city buildings. But they have not, as the last that I've heard, that they have not completed testing them all yet. They have made measures as far as being able to reduce lead that is being consumed, and as I felt they were being consumed by the students. They've made remediations as far as taking those particular items out of service. For example, if a water fountain was found to have a higher level of lead coming from it, they stopped or discontinued use of that water fountain. So they've made taken some action as far as being able to remediate the problem. But I think we should not be satisfied until everything has been tested and every school has been tested, every park district has been tested as well.
Caller, thank you very much for that question. Please call if you have a question for the Alderman. The number is 312-738-1060. We're waiting for your call. Another question I have here, this is a common conversation that's going on throughout the nation and world probably. President Trump continues to talk about the violence, stating recently that, quote, it's worse than some of the places that we read about in the Middle East, unquote, and that much of Chicago's violence is caused by people, quote, not even legally in our country, unquote. How can we begin to get away from the decisiveness, rhetoric, and focus on positive results?
Wow, I read that as well. And comments like that, and I don't want to sit here and criticize our president, but we can't accept comments like that that will tend to cause more division within our races. That is a divisive comment, as his campaign had been when he was seeking the presidency. But rather than causing division within the city, we have to really focus on bringing this city together. And that's something that I, as well as the other elected officials on the west side of Chicago, are working very hard to do. We are not going to be able to do this without working together. Our president has mentioned Chicago several times since 2016 when he began running for president. And every time it's been negative. And we have to challenge him on that because we are not a war zone here. Yes, we have problems with increased violence, but we are not a war zone. This is a fabulous city to live in, and it's one that I'm very proud to live in.
Thank you for that. Along those same lines, and so we all heard him talk about, that he mentioned bringing in the federal support. We're not sure what that meant, but some people have been talking about it doesn't mean bringing what they call boots on the street, the National Guards on the corners of Chicago streets. What do you think your constituents will feel in the 29th Ward about something like that?
Well, I personally welcome the resources that the federal government can bring, especially when there are resources that's going to bring opportunities for employment. We live in a ward on the west side of Chicago where 91% of young males and young women, young male and women, females, are unemployed between the ages of 14 and 19. That's a very high number. So I welcome resources that would tend to benefit and bring benefit to the community and bring resources to the community. We're lacking educational opportunities on the west side of Chicago. We're lacking employment opportunities on the west side of Chicago. So what essentially will happen if we don't have jobs or don't have the proper training to place folks in those jobs, we're going to continue to stay in a situation where crime is going to run amok, and it will continue to be very prevalent in the community.
So those kind of resources are welcome?
Those resources are welcome, but any resources that will put military forces on the streets of the west side of Chicago or throughout the city of Chicago, I would not welcome those.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Let me show your website. I believe this is your website, so any comments on your website there?
No comments on it, but if there's information that could be obtained on my website, we try to update it very frequently, and it could be the website's aldtaliaferro.com, aldermantaliaferro.com, and we put a lot of valuable information that the community would actually benefit from.
Great. So you have a website, and later on we'll put up some more information on how to contact the office. Right now we have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Yes, I want to catch the alderman's what the alderman's thoughts are on the recent Department of Justice report about police misconduct with the Chicago police. This is especially I want to get this take because with the city hiring more police officers, I know that they're looking to get more police officers for the last few months. So with new police officers coming in, how do we begin to change the culture within the police department so that there's a trust between the police department and the community?
Well, first caller, that is an excellent question. As many folks are aware, that I did serve with the Chicago Police Department for almost 21 years, and a lot of the Justice Department's report didn't surprise many of us. And as a police officer, we know that there needs to be change, and I think many police officers will tell you there needs to be change. There needs to be reforms within the Chicago Police Department for the better. We have to take these new officers that will be hired over the next couple of years and make sure they are constantly trained. That includes adequate training at the Chicago Police Academy, and that includes ongoing in-service training after they become police officers. One of the first things that a young police officer will do after graduating from the academy and graduating from their field training office program, they seek out advice and they seek out leadership and they seek out training from veteran officers. Oftentimes that's really good to help enhance your career, but there's oftentimes that you can seek advice and from those that are more so and have a negative view of the police department and a negative view of the city. And that in turn, it transitions down to a new officer and he develops an attitude at a young age. We have to prevent that with constant training at the Chicago Police Academy or wherever they're trained at. But most important, in order for us to bridge that gap of trust between the community and the police, we got to get the police involved in the community more, and we have to get the community involved in policing again. Throughout the years, resources have been pulled away from community policing. I think it's time that we put the resources back into community policing. And I want to especially acknowledge my good friend, Commissioner Richard Boykin, Cook County Commissioner of the 1st District, for his neighborhood revitalization plan, which takes the abandoned houses that are throughout these impoverished communities and places police officers in there, firemen in there, teachers in there for a 5-year period, at which time, after they've lived in the community, in that house for 5 years, they're given a deed to the property. That puts the community and the police together. And then that's a likelihood that violence can be reduced as a result of that. So, caller, I thank you for your call because there's a lot we could do in taking a look at that DOJ report and benefit from implementing some of those recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, caller, for that question. And that's like what you just mentioned is like going back to the original idea behind community policing.
Absolutely.
Allowing the police officers to work where they live.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Let me go back to the overhead here. This is your contact information. The office hours are 9 to 7, Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, 9 to 5. And you have Saturday hours, 9 to 11.
Yes, we do. And we actually also, we open a satellite office on the northwest part of the ward. So on Saturday, we have 2 locations that are open, Saturday from 9 to noon. And I'm committed to opening a 3rd location sometime this either early spring on the south end of the ward. I want to be as accessible as possible because it's important to be able to talk to your community leaders, not just the elected officials, but your community leaders as well.
Great. I think we have a caller. Caller, what is your question?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So firstly, thank you for taking my call. I wanted to ask the alderman about a new ordinance that's been proposed by Alderman Brendan Riley regarding no play zones for street performers in Chicago. I think it's really awful, frankly, to take away an opportunity for these people to share their art with a city, Chicago, that's known for its artistry, frankly, as well as, limit these people from making money. Now, it's very possible that I am missing some perspective on this,
So I just wanted to hear from the alderman what he understands about the ordinance, as well as his thoughts on restricting certain areas downtown from street performers, or street performances rather.
Yeah, I was certainly, I've not heard of the ordinance. This is my first time hearing of it. Um, but one of the things that I really respect of my colleagues is because they know their wards better than I do. I could certainly say that on the west side of Chicago, I would not restrict, as long as it doesn't interfere with the flow of traffic or public safety or the safety of the artists themselves. You try not to want to interfere with that. Uh, Alderman Riley has a very, very busy ward. Perhaps most of his ward encompasses the busiest and heaviest traffic. So I would only assume that, based on his experience and based on his constituents, he brought forth that ordinance, that proposed ordinance. So I do want to respect the fact that he knows his ward much better than I do. However, implementing an ordinance like that citywide probably would not be in the best interest unless an alderman had some type of deference to be able to opt in or opt out.
Thank you, caller, for that question. I have a question here for CPS has cut school budget in the middle of the school year for the second time in this current year. How are schools in your ward affected, and what needs to be done to support these schools?
Well, we need to always support our schools. I can't think of a council member that is not an adamant supporter of CPS. Our teachers are placed in conditions to be able to teach that without the resources that they need or the resources that they deserve. So they're having to go in and teach our students under circumstances that some schools don't have to deal with. So with that, I tend to want to support CPS as well as our teachers wholeheartedly. And it's also important to look at charter school expansion when you talk about that. There's recently talk about a charter school expansion that would affect my ward. And so as a city, we're looking at expanding, and I believe in choice. But when you're looking at expanding charter schools and taking away resources from our public schools, I think we're going about that wrong. If we want to support our charter schools, we have to make sure the resources are being put into our public schools as well, rather than being taken away. I've not heard of any recent cuts as of recently with the schools in my ward, but I do know that we began the school year with several $1 million in cuts. And those resources have the lack of those resources tend to affect our students because they're taking away primarily liberal arts program and sports. And when you take away these activities, it tends to have a detrimental effect on our students.
Thank you. You're watching Political Forum, a community service for CAN TV, and I'm Freddie Calixto, one of the board members here. This is a live interactive show. You can call in if you have a question for the alderman. Our number is 312-738-1060. If you have any questions for the alderman of the 29th Ward, please call in. Let's see, we have another question here about the CTA bus drivers. This is brand new, fresh off the press. I think it just came out in the news today about the rally of many bus drivers rallying to demand longer bathroom breaks and cleaner bathroom facilities, and share the stories of portable potties with no running water or heat. What have you heard and this regarding this concerning issue?
Well, I just recently heard about it. I was a little busy today, so I didn't get a chance to see anything on social media or either print media or news media. But I say this, we want to provide the best working conditions that we possibly can. Perhaps not luxury, but you shouldn't have to fight for a bathroom break. When you need to go, you have to go. Now, that makes for a happier bus driver, a more courteous bus driver, and a better ride for those that are using the transit system. But to have to fight for a longer bathroom break or a bathroom break period, I think is wrong. we look for quality of life in our, or better quality of life in the neighborhoods in which we live in. We also should fight for better quality of life on the jobs that we have. So to be able to have these necessary amenities available to you, I wholeheartedly support their, whatever they did the day I even heard, or whatever they did, they would have my support. Because we have to make sure no one should have to suffer conditions like that.
Okay, thank you, Alderman.
Mhm.
Again, if you have a question for the Alderman, 312-738-1060. The city is cracking down on building contractors who do unauthorized or shoddy work. This is in the wake of a firefighter's death in a building undergoing unauthorized work. What are your thoughts?
Well, that was actually just up today in a joint committee on zoning as well as license, to which Chairman Mitz presided over today. And there was a unanimous vote. We all voted in favor of the ordinance or the revision. When you look at it like this, it's going to make sure that we have our business owners are protected, our residential, our constituents are protected as well, because it puts a shoddy contractor on notice. And once they've been put on notice, they have an opportunity now where the city can revocate their license for a period of time. And so that would make any contractor, whether it's a general contractor or a special trade contractor, that would put them on notice to say, hey, I have to make sure that the work that I'm doing is up to par, is up to standard, and I'm permitted to do this work. So I wholeheartedly support the ordinance, and I believe it was an ordinance of Mayor Emanuel himself, along with Ms. Judy Friedman from the Department of Building. And I think with it, with its implementation after the next city council meeting, we'll start seeing a less number of calls that they're receiving as a result of shoddy contractors.
Well, thank you, Alderman. We have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Yes, I have a question for the Alderman.
Yes, what's your question?
Yes. Why is it that all the aldermen always go along with what the mayor said? They don't seem to try to get together with the seniors in the neighborhood or try to fight for the people in the neighborhood. Look like everything that the mayor want to do or say, all the aldermen go along with him. Then they get up and tell us a different story later on.
Well, caller, thank you for that. And I would have to, respectfully disagree with you, though. All the aldermen do not side with the mayor all the time. I, for one, and I'll only speak as to myself, I have stood out from the very moment that I was elected and stood with my community. I believed from the very onset of my being elected that my ward deserved someone downtown that will represent their interest. So right away, I voted against an increase in property tax. I voted against, and this is voting, as you say, voting against the mayor. I voted against the increase in the or the implementation of a garbage fee. I voted against an increased water tax. So it's important to me to stand with the community. I know I have quite a few of my colleagues that do the same. Yes, the mayor does have those that vote consistently with him, but there are quite a few that vote consistently against the mayor. And not necessarily against the mayor, but for their community. It's a big difference.
Yep. Caller, thank you for that question. Time is running out again. Here we are. Let me throw this up again for in case you want to reach the alderman. There's your information. And I'd like to thank the alderman for appearing on Political Forum. And thank you, viewers, and for the callers tonight. Our telephone technician has been Sylvia. Thank you, Sylvia. Political Forum is brought to you every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on CAN TV 21 and on cantv.org/hotline. So are there any last comments that you want to make about the 29th Ward that you want our callers to, or our audience to know?
Well, it's, I would say, we have a wonderful ward. And you're always invited to move from the ward that you're in to the 29th Ward.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for being on the show tonight. Thank you to our watchers.
Thank you. Thanks for
Bye-bye.
having me.